New Year.
As some may just have heard, it is New Year's, and it's
Apparently.
not. It is March 26th as of this recording, 2024. Welcome to the past if you're listening from the future, and welcome to the future if you're listening from the past, if that's possible.
Might be.
It might be, right. Welcome, guys, to another codeFellowship podcast. My name is JB, where purpose meets function. I am so glad to have another guest on the show. I'll let him introduce himself. Really awesome conversation we had before the podcast. I should have recorded it, but I decided not to. But I should have, right? Should have, would have, could have, but did not. So we'll get started. I want to say your name, but I want you to introduce yourself. I'm trying to be a better interviewer, right? Instead of being the interviewee, I talk a lot. So I love to change that in this season of the podcast. So introduce yourself, brother. What's your name? Where you're from? I know that you are a software engineer for a life insurance tech company or an insurance tech company, as we were talking about. Tell us a little bit more about that. And how your faith intersects with your work as you made your transition into the tech space.
Cool. It's going to be a long story. So let me take it back. I talk a lot too. So sorry.
We're Hispanic.
I know, right? Yeah, loud and we talk a lot. Yeah. So I always warn people. I'm like, look, sometimes my mouth is like a sink that's been turned on. You just gotta. There's good stuff in there sometimes. So anyway, my name's Jonathan Martinez. I'm a software engineer at Bestow Life Insurance Company. We are more now like an insurtech company than a life insurance company. We've built a platform where we can onboard partners to use our life insurance to use our life insurance platform so they can sell their own products through that platform. It's a startup in 2016. So we have some, we got 8 years of skin in the game at this point. Taking on some bigger clients at this point, some bigger partners, which is really cool. And yeah, so anyway, so I've been there for almost 3 years. This is my first software engineering job that I've had, and so I've been there for 3 years. I was telling JB before this that I was a band director for 9 years before I was a software engineer. Yeah, so had a whole career, built a band program at one school that didn't have one. I went to another school for a year that had like 70 years of band history and like had won contests for a long time. And I was one of 9 band directors there. And then the last school I went to was like a nationally recognized program. So the way I like to tell people is I kind of like got to the top of the mountain and I looked around and I was like, this is it. Like, there's not much here. And I was busy. I wasn't seeing I had a young son at the time. I was not seeing him for 2 or 3 days at a time. It was very tough. And so when COVID came around, I had 3 months at home with my family before the summer. We went on walks, we hung out, we got to, just do family stuff. And it gave me a chance to really like reflect on my life and what I wanted out of it and all that stuff. I was already saved at this point. So there was a lot of prayer involved and a lot of just talking to God about it. Like, what direction do you want me to go? And so I decided I really wanted some financial freedom because as a teacher, I was living paycheck to paycheck for my entire career, which was just stressful. Although there were a lot of blessings in that too. And feel free to stop me if I'm just like going on and on.
Yeah, so I wanted to ask you, was it high school or college band directing?
It was high school and middle school and all the way down to 4th grade one time. So
cool.
Yeah, it was
carry on.
Yeah, recorders and anyway, yeah. So let me go back. So yeah, there was a lot of blessings even whenever I was a teacher. Like I remember my wife wanted to come home whenever we had our son. And
Mm-hmm.
I mean, so we were taking a big pay cut. Well, not big pay cut. I mean, a pay cut. And I was like, it's not going to work on paper. And then we made it. I mean, we're here. We're okay. We're fine.
Praise God.
I have to let my dog out. I'm sorry.
Sure. No problem.
But just out of my office. Yeah, praise God for sure. And I reminded her about that often. I reminded myself. It was awesome. But anyway, so yeah, so then I thought about it and I was like, I really want to spend more time with my son. I'm not gonna be one of those dads who doesn't have a relationship with their kids, especially at the expense of like for a job that they're already sacrificing for it. And I think that was a big one too, is I feel like they were sacrificing for me to have the job. Like I wasn't home, we didn't have money, and so they couldn't go do anything anyway. And like then I wasn't ever there, and then I wasn't helping her. She was very stressed out a lot of the time with him, and anyway, lots of stuff. So I had that time to reflect. I was like, I want some financial freedom. I want some time freedom, which led me to learning software engineering. So I taught myself over the course of 13 months and landed a job at Bestow, where I still am.
Wow.
Yeah.
What resources did you use to self-teach yourself? Like free code camp or
Free code
Codecademy?
camp. Yeah. I've met Quincy Larson. He's pretty cool.
Awesome.
Yeah. And yeah, so like free code camp was great. I used that. I still remember like went through the first lesson on my couch on my phone. I don't recommend it. And
me neither.
Yeah. I made a little cat website and I was like, babe, look, it's a cat website that I made. And she was like, great. For me, it was very exciting.
Yeah.
And I loved that it was free because again, I was a teacher. I didn't have money for that. So for like a, $20K boot camp, I also couldn't take away, like if I would have left to go do that, like I couldn't feed my family. So, so for that year, I got up at 4:30 in the morning, went to school, studied for 3 hours, taught the whole day, went home after after my son was down to sleep. I studied for 3 more hours and then did the whole thing again the next day for 13 months.
So because you're a band director, was your degree in performing arts?
Yep. I have you can't see it, but I have a bachelor's and a master's right here in music education.
Cool.
So yeah, great. Awesome. They're just sitting there collecting dust.
Yeah. No, it's incredible. I keep saying this time and time again. Every time I meet someone that's a developer, they're a musician. There's always that creative component within it. Like the episode that I recorded before this one, if it comes out at the same time in order, with Devante, he made beats, right? And it's just like making beats so that it's just still music component in there. My web design business mentor, he was a drummer for a Christian rock band, metal band back in the day. And just various other friends that I have, colleagues. So it's really awesome just to continue to see God's creativity in his children, but also how it helps them transition into this field. So talk about that. How is that work up to becoming a software engineer where you're at today? And where was God in the midst of that trial and tribulation in your life, in your season?
Yeah. So first on the music and the software engineering thing, I think they're very intertwined. I've met a ton of musicians and like linguists, people that could speak different languages in the field. And it's just because I think all those things trigger the same part of the brain, like the technical mixed with the creative. And like a lot of people struggle with that if you've never learned a discipline. Like if you've gone through the music, like you're learning an instrument or even practicing singing, like you're learning a discipline and you're studying it and you're practicing it and you're developing it. And so you know how to develop that skill that a lot of people don't figure that out. Like I've told my wife, I was like, if there's something I want to do, I know how to go about learning how to do the thing. Like for the most part. Now I figured out how it works for me and I figured out how I can learn it. And like, like for right now, like I've been hitting the gym pretty hard and like trying to do a body recomposition to where I'm gaining muscle, losing fat at the same time. So I've been
Mm.
studying a lot on like the body and the science involved, like how much protein I need to be taking, you know, how to really like hit specific muscles and stuff. And so like, I know the blueprint of like how do I learn something, and so I'm able to just anyway.
Yeah, my wife tells me that I invest too much time in certain things. So like and that's just how I am. Like if I am if I am going to get hold on a topic or like a skill, I want to know like the deepest, most technical aspect of it. When I learned guitar by myself, I played by ear. I didn't read music notes. To this day, I don't. I just read chord charts and like tab
Mhm.
notations. Um, and I even went to the deepest part of like knowing the type of wood on the guitar, electric guitar, for the neck, the type, the shape, everything. You name it, the electronics, everything. And then like with my son right now, I want to get him into baseball. He's showing interest in like baseball. He's a 5-year-old. So we went not so long ago and got some gloves, a bat, and just a ball. And that was my way of being more intentional, be present in
Yeah.
their lives. Um, because I have become one of those dads that is there but absent.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to be more intentional, but as I'm intentional, I'm also intentional about what it takes to be present and
Yeah.
what do I have to do. So it's kind of weird how the brain works that way.
I get that. Yeah. And I don't know, like I said, with any discipline, it just takes time. And
Hmm.
my wife gets on to me as well for like, you get obsessed with this thing and then you move to the next thing. I
Yeah,
was like,
that's my
well,
wife.
listen, I tell her, I'm like, well, listen, if you want to be good at something, you have to get obsessed with it for a little bit. I was like, but my thing is once I know enough about this that I can just put it on autopilot, I'm gonna do that. Like,
Yeah.
and so that's kind of the way I look at it. I was like, I don't want to do this thing halfway and spend all this time and do it
Hmm.
halfway. I want to get good at it, do it the most efficient that I can, and then set it up as its own thing that's happening in the background that I don't have to think about anymore.
And
So
if
like,
it didn't work out, and that season it didn't work out,
yeah,
and then those skill sets are already there. It's muscle memory. It's ingrained. And then when you do need it,
yep.
it's available.
It's there, yeah. Back in 2016, I got like I didn't get shredded or anything, but I did put on a fair amount of muscle and I lost a lot of fat. And so when I went back to the gym in like December,
Mm.
it was my body was like, "Oh yeah, I remember this, but we can't lift that heavy anymore." It's been 8 years. I had a son and a daughter between then, so like
So yeah, dad
it's been a
bod.
while. Yeah, but like but the movements like I still
Hmm.
remembered, and I was able to kind of But then I also realized how many shortfalls and shortcomings I had back then because I didn't really study it that much. So
Yes.
anyway, um, then as far as going like back like 5 minutes back to the question of like where God was on my journey into software engineering and through software engineering, I can really trace. I do this sometimes where I trace His presence back like just even further than that. Um, like I always tell people like when I was I think 2013, I was a band director, just started, band directing, and my dad gave me a computer, like a desktop computer. I learned how to write field shows on it. So like marching band,
Oh
moving
yes.
things, and I started a business with that. So
That's
he gave
cool.
me that. I used it for my master's and I learned and I picked up like 5 clients. I wrote for them. I made some money. I made enough money that I could buy a nice like gaming laptop because that software is pretty heavy. It uses Java and it's a heavy software. So I was like, I need a really good computer. Which then, whenever I decided to learn how to code, um, actually, let me go back. So I had this really nice computer. I was getting my master's, um, and that was helping me with my master's. My master's led me to get this job in Longview because I'm from Louisiana,
Hmm.
Longview. So I went to Longview, Texas, and then from there, like with my master's and my computer, like I moved from there to Dallas, which kind of opened my mind up to like what, and as far as band goes, like Louisiana bands are like and I hope nobody from Louisiana sees that, but they're just not supported. They're not really supported. Texas bands are a whole, they're a monster. Like
And
they're
Georgia
really,
ones too.
yeah.
Yeah.
So Texas music education is like world renowned. And so
Wow.
I wanted to come here for that. So I got here, had my nice computer, and then I was here for 2 years, and I was like, okay, so like this is, and then with that new laptop that I got, like then I started learning how to code. And it's like I can trace that whole journey back, like with, I don't know if it's always like a very intentional, like I heard God audibly, but it's like he kind of just gives direction or like a gentle nudging. And I've become somebody who, like, when I feel that, I'm like, well, what am I going to do? Turn away from it? No, let's go. So I just do it.
Yeah.
There's one time specifically I started a discipleship group. I remember it was when I was transitioning from teaching to software, and I was like, God, I feel like you want me to do this, but it's really not a good time. I'm about to start a whole new career, like, whatever. And I was like, all right, I'll do this. If you put people in my life that like I need to include in this discipleship group, then I will take that as a sign that like I need to do it, and I'll just do it. And lo and behold, it was just like boom, boom. But like I needed 4 guys, and like they just kind of came out of nowhere, and I was like,
You did the Gideon. You asked him
yeah.
for a sign, and
And he was like,
yeah.
got
There
you.
you go.
So I did it. Yeah. And the discipleship group thing too is like it was from my old church, and we would do it for an entire year. So like
Mm,
an entire year of like 5 journals a week, memorizing scripture, like meeting
wow.
once a week for a couple hours. Like it was a commitment. So I was like, I don't know if I need to do this right now, God. And he was like, that's too bad because we're doing it. So we did it
Hmm.
and made it through. I think I missed like 1 journal, so it wasn't too bad. But
That's
anyway,
cool.
yeah. So back to now, or not now, I guess a couple of years ago when I was teaching, I would get up early, I would study, and I prayed that entire year. I was like, God, if this isn't what you want for me, please let me lose interest. Let me,
That's
I don't know,
powerful.
just let it not work, right? Um, because like I think sometimes we want something so bad that we just like we'll just make it work. And like if it's not in his will, I don't want to do it. Like just to be
Amen.
honest. I mean, um like A, I can't do it because none of us are stronger than him or his will, but B, I don't even want to pursue that. Like just take it out of my brain, take it out of my heart, just remove it. And so I prayed that every day for a long time. And instead of like losing interest, it just got fired up more and more. And I was like, okay, I'll keep pursuing it then. Um, and then, yeah, so I kept following that up. 2021, I landed the job. Very different market than it is now. So if you're watching, I'm sorry. It's very different now than it was. I was very fortunate. Took me 300 applications, and I finally got it on 301. I actually ended up with 2 offers at the same time.
Wow.
Um, and I prayed a lot about it, and I was like, it was between an agency and Bestow, and like I don't know, everybody I met at that agency was kind of grumpy, and everybody I met at Bestow was super nice, and like I don't know, they really wanted me there, and I wanted to be there, and it worked out because they paid much better. They're super nice. It's been great. I love the company.
It's always awesome um when God takes care of you. And like you were saying, he gently nudged you. And that's the whole essence of walking in his will. Like his will is irresistible. Like
Yeah,
God puts into your heart his heart and his statutes and his desires. When we come to that place of humility like you did, it's like, God, if it's not in your will, I don't want any of this. I want to lose interest, etc. Like that is awesome because not a lot of us pray that way. I know that when I was in my baby Christian walk, I didn't pray in that fashion. I was praying for God to work in my life, change my heart because I was wretched and I was just in a dark place. But I also wanted the next step that takes me forward, like a better job, not minimum wage, the ability to learn how to drive, etc. I lived in New York City all my life. I didn't have a license, and I needed all those specific things. But because God saw my desire for my heart to change, then He rewarded according to His will and what He found favorable for my life. And it's always awesome to see that what He gives us doesn't stray us away from Him. Even if we seem like we're straying away, it wasn't something that He did. It's something that we always do,
Yeah.
because we are separating ourselves when, you mentioned something about obsession, right? It's good to have an obsession at the beginning of something. Sometimes, like for me, like I think that's bad. Um, but I get what you're saying, right? Like it's good to be invested, I would say, would be the better word. I would be invested into something, but also recognizing as Christians that it does not become idolatry, that it does not replace God, but that God is actually the one leading the charge for that investment.
Yeah.
And it's awesome. I hear that and I see that through your story. So it's really awesome, brother. And praise God Almighty for that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I was gonna say exactly like I say obsessed because that's what my wife
Yeah,
says.
because that's like
And
the
like,
expression. Yeah.
yeah, and I'm just like, I'm not obsessed, but I'm like, I just tell her like, look, if you want to be good at something, you have to spend time in it. You can't just be like magically good at it. That doesn't work. We all have natural affinities and abilities for stuff, and like, I don't know, a lot of the things I've worked on in my life, I haven't been natural at. Like, it took me 3 days to get a sound on the saxophone. After
Mm.
teaching sixth graders for a long time, I can tell you it is not that hard to make a sound on the saxophone. But for me, I struggled. And then, and then before I moved here, I played professionally for a while. And like, but if you go back to the beginning, like it wasn't natural. Coding is the same thing. Like, even to this day, the technical aspect of it is still the harder part for me. Like,
For
I
me
mean,
as well.
my managers have told me time and time again, like, your soft skills are amazing. I'm like, well, I was a band director for 9 years. Like, I talked to administrators and parents and,
Yes.
like
Client
kids.
facing
Yeah,
roles.
yeah, all kinds of that. So anyway, so if you don't spend time developing a skill and like spend time learning about it, you're not just going to be good at it. It just
Mhm.
that doesn't happen. And like, you might have some that you are, like, there's people who they don't really have to try and they're just like really strong, or they're in shape. They're just like, I had a friend in college who was just always thin. Now we'd eat the same food, and me, I just was like,
Yeah.
and he was over here just like whatever, man. Like, or like we'd go to the gym to do something and he could just do it. And I was like, come on, like, I have to work, and
Yeah.
that's fine. But then, he also spent 10 years in college and I got out after 4.5. So it's like,
Yeah. And
you know,
that's where the Bible talks a lot about coveting. Right? When
hmm
we covet our neighbor's belongings or possessions, or envy would be the other word for that. When we start to compare ourselves and then we desire and covet what they want, what they have, we look at the bigger picture. When God places us in that bigger picture and then He allows us to look back, we're like, wow, like I hear a lot of people, they're spending so much money on trying to get computer science degrees. And for me, I try to do that. But there was a point where it seemed, now looking back, that the Lord molded the path to just kind of dab into it, see if I was able to do that while I was in the military. And while you're in the military, you're able to get your education paid for. Um, and you're able to take classes as long as it doesn't interfere with your duties as a service member. But I took away time from my family, um and so the Lord really allowed me to take a dab at that cybersecurity, IT, and I didn't get to finish. Until one day, the opportunity of using my GI Bill, after I'm out of the military for about a year, came into my line of sight, and said you could use it for a coding boot camp. And because I got out a little too early due to injuries, I was at 90% of education benefit, so I had to pay like 10% responsibility, which was still great. And and God lined it all up. I had two choices that were really strong. I ended up picking one because the one was able to give me payments on that 10%. So by the time I graduated, I was able to pay it off. And you know what I paid it off with? The money that I got from the VA for going to school. So I was like, God is so good because it didn't affect my pocket necessarily, the main bread of the pocket, but I was able to use that and then have some left. Um, and be able to pay, responsibilities and stuff like that. My wife also works, so but it was something that we presented to God and God allowed it. And it's super super awesome where we are able to not only ask God for something for help, but seeing how he works it in his timing, in his will. Because imagine if I would have obtained what my fellow neighbor had, and it did not benefit me. It would have taken my health down. It would have separated me from God. But I had to be patient with God, and sometimes even forget about it. Right? Like there's when I joined the military, at the beginning I was trying to force it, but I forgot about it. I ended up working at Dish Network. I was newly married as well, and then things weren't going so well. But God gave me the opportunity to go into the military. And it wasn't because it was a desire I was being fulfilled of, but it was because God had a plan for my wife and the children that were to come, that they weren't even yet in the, I mean, my oldest was in the picture because I found out before I left. But it's just awesome to be able to see that when you stand in a bigger picture and you look back, how small that panorama was from our perspective, but then when we walk inside God's grace and will, we see it all clear.
Yeah, for sure.
And just a segue now, so now you got into this role at Bestowed, and I'm sure, like you were saying, like the technical aspect is the toughest part, and I agreed with you because I go through that in my job. I go through like imposter syndrome. I feel like I'm not worthy of this opportunity and position, but I give thanks to God every time when I feel that way because He's the one that placed me in that role during a time last year where the market was just shot still, and some people from last year are still looking for jobs today. So I count my blessings there and pray for them too. How did you see that transition now that you are fully into this company? How did it go the first 2 years, I guess? Now you're in it for 3. Um, what did you see was your toughest challenge, and how did you present that to God?
Um, yeah, I mean, landing the job itself was already a huge blessing. I remember praying a lot of thanks, especially whenever I got like the salary that I was going to get. I didn't make, I mean, it's not like astronomical. As an engineer now, I'm like, oh, I mean, that wasn't bad. But back then, from being a teacher, it was much better. It was like
Hmm.
20K more than I was making as a teacher.
I
And we
was
were,
making like 30 some thousand
yeah,
in the army, so
yeah. I was making like, I don't know, 65 as a teacher in Dallas. And which is fine except for it's expensive here. And,
hmm.
so like to get a bump like that was, and especially as my first job in a new field was, I remember like I had tears in my eyes. I was so excited about it. And then of course all the other perks that came with it, like we have unlimited paid time off, and they pay for our insurance for our whole family, and I mean all that
That's
stuff.
awesome.
I was like, okay, because we were on not MetaShare, but it was like, I think there's like a Christian Brothers like insure share kind of thing that we were
Hmm.
having to do because I couldn't afford the school insurance. So anyway, so yeah, those were huge blessings. And but yeah, once I got to the job, um, it was challenging. I remember the first month or so, I was like, I don't really have anything to do. Like they so to give some context, they created a position below software engineer one for me. Like my technical ability was that lacking that they created an associate position for me. There has not been an associate since.
So
Um,
you're the one and only.
yeah. So I tell people I'm really good at talking. So I convinced enough people, and also God went before me, and like
His
he was like,
grace.
"Hey,
Amen.
you should hire that guy, even though he's not very good." And so, yeah, because it worked out. I mean, like all of them were like, they're like, "Yeah, we're worried about his." Yeah, I mean, like I'm thinking. Sorry, I'm thinking back. I'm remembering things as I talk
No
about.
worries.
But like I remember the interview process, and I remember so the way it worked out. Like the first, I messaged. Sorry, I was I'm in the React Dallas group on Slack, and one of the recruiters messaged. They're like, "Hey, we're looking for some developers at Bestow." And I messaged her and I was like, "Hey, would y'all be open to taking somebody who's never been a software engineer yet?" And she was like, um, "Probably not. We're a little more experienced here." And I was like, "Can you please just send this to somebody?" And like I was a little pushy about it. And she's like, I can try, but I mean, I don't think. And then like a week later, she's like, "Hey, one of the managers wants to meet you." I was like, "What?" So I talked to him and we hit it off big. It was great. Like so I was like, "So I want to talk about next steps." And he's like, "Oh, you're going to the next step. Don't worry about it." I was like,
Oh.
"All right."
Okay.
So great. Went to the next step. I took like a coding assessment and bombed it. I remember I did it at 5 a.m. at the school, and I was just like, I can't. How do I? What? I don't. Anyway, bombed it. And she called me. The recruiter called me the next day. She's like, "Hey, so you bombed your coding assessment." I remember telling my wife the day before when I bombed it. I was like, "Hey, I'm sorry. I'm not going to get that job. Like, there's no way they would hire me after that. It was not good." And then the recruiter called me the next day, and she was like, "So you bombed it, and but they still really want to hire you. So we're going to have you talk to another engineering manager." I know. I was like,
Praise the Lord
right.
Almighty. That's
So
amazing.
so I talked to this other engineering manager who's actually at GitHub now. So he's not at Bestow anymore, but he's just like, "Yeah, I mean, you seem like you have everything you need. I think you just need time." And I was like,
Hmm.
"Yeah, and a job." So they moved me to the final interview, and I did like a coding assessment and like what do you call it? The other thing? I always forget. It's like culture assessment, and then
Oh.
like I met the CTO, and yeah, so like I did the coding assessment with a couple of back end engineers, which is interesting. And but it was just like strict coding stuff, right? So it wasn't like UI. And so yeah, so even like at the end they get the reviews from everybody and they're like, "Yeah, he wasn't too technically strong, but we really liked him. He'd be cool to work with." And then like that's it. I got the job, and I was so floored whenever I got it. I was just like, I can't, like, I did not deserve this job, but God paved the way, and I got it. So anyway, now moving into the actual question, like, had a lot of struggles, just technically. Like I said, the first month or so, my manager was like, "Hey, just read code. Like, just get in the code base and just read code." And I didn't really know what that meant because I had never done it. So,
Hmm.
um, so I remember telling my wife, I was like, "Man, I feel like this is like if this is the job, this is going to be a very boring, but like I don't know, like because I wasn't doing anything, I wasn't providing any value. As soon as I was able to start picking up tickets, I did, and so like I asked them if I could do some studying. They gave me a stipend to do like front end masters. So I did the entire professional development course on front end masters. It was 66 hours of coursework, and I did it in like 5 months. Um, I just went after it and learned a ton of stuff. It was really good. And during that time, I started picking up more and more tickets. I found a mentor at work, um, and started just ramping up on all those things and just like don't get stagnant, right? Which my mentor, my personal like coding mentor that was not work related, had always told me. He's like, "Look, don't be like one of those engineers." He's like, "I know lots of engineers. They get in, they work for about half a year or a year, and then they just stop learning. Like they
Hmm.
stop growing." And he's like, "Don't do that." And um, so anyway, so I just kept learning and kept growing, and it was still difficult, but I would pray about it. And like to be honest, I probably should have had a lot more imposter syndrome because I was not very good. But I've always just been confident for no reason about stuff. And to be honest, like in my most recent, I have to let my cat out.
No
Sorry.
worries.
Get out. Yeah.
It's bring your pet to podcast day.
Yeah, apparently they all want to be in here until I'm in a podcast. Anyway, yeah, so like I don't know why that confidence had been there before, but I know recently a lot of it has just been like confidence in God. When I took, so I'm going to do like a little bit of a flash forward, but like talking about, flipping houses and stuff.
Yeah,
I was
that's a
talking
good
to my
segue.
father-in-law a couple of 6 months ago, I guess. And I was like, yeah, I'm going to, flip this house. And he was like, you're not scared? And I was like, I mean, yeah, but like God's going to take care of me regardless. And I think that's what powers like I was telling you before we started this that I'm a man of action. And I think that's what always fuels my action is like I just have that I just have faith that like God's going to take care of me no matter what happens, no matter what position I get myself into or I fall into or whatever, like he's going to be there. He's not just going to leave me and just be like, sorry, good luck, figure it out. Like, and that's one of the things I pray when I pray every morning is like, thank you for walking with me. Like, thank you for being here.
Amen.
And so with flipping houses, it gets scary. Like we bought a house in October, we flipped it, we put it on the market January 20th, and it's still in the market. And so every month I pay utilities and I pay an interest payment and it hurts. And I'm like, can we please sell it? Like I have showing today and I'm like, let's go, let's sell it. But at the same time, like, but I know God's going to take care of us. I know he's going to make it work out. And I don't know. I feel like if you approach life like that, you'll be a lot more apt to take chances and to take risks because like he's got you. I'm trying to remember the specific scripture, but it's like the peace that transcends understanding.
Oh, that
Is that
surpasses all
Proverbs?
understanding.
Yeah, is that Proverbs? Proverbs 4? I can't remember.
We can do this live. Don't worry. Bible verse.
Yeah, I should know it because I memorized it.
I know that Paul talks about it too.
Is it 5 through 6? No, it's not that one.
All understanding. Look at us guys, Bible nerds looking at stuff.
Philippians 4:7. No, that's not it. No, well, yeah, it is. Yeah, that's one of them. Peace of God which transcends all understanding will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. Yeah, Philippians 4:6 through 7.
Right.
There's also Matthew 6:26, which let me see. I want to make sure. Look at the birds of the air. They neither sow nor reap nor gather into barns, and yet your heavenly Father feeds them. That one really carried us through when I was a band director. And like I would always go back to that verse because I was like, he's going to take care. Like we're good. Like even when it's stressful and you're worried about it, we're good. So I think about these verses a lot whenever I am taking risks. I'm actually investing. I'm going to be closing on another flip in a couple weeks. And financially, we are not in the best place to buy it because we still have that other one. But like, it's a good deal. I've tried to walk away from it a few times, but like, it just keeps getting sweeter. And I'm like, okay, God, like, what? Like, I prayed about it. Like, hey, man, send me, or not, man, God, send me away from it if it's not meant to be. But like, that hasn't happened. So I'm like, well, I guess I'm in here. So, anyway, I know I completely skipped 2 years of Bestow history.
You're good.
Anyway,
that's fine. I mean, that was a really good segue into like the diversifying like your career plan to be able to build that freedom that you were talking about. I think you talked about it earlier and then talked about it off the show at the beginning. So it seems like there is a risk that's being taken so that this can come to light, but God has given you that confidence and that assurance so that you're able to proceed with it. And it seems like like you understand the risk clearly, but you're willing to go in for it. And that's something that at the beginning of this year for me, same thing, I was praying about, particularly what 2024 was going to look like, and what God is doing. And slowly he's been weighing into my heart what the next steps are. He has guided me to go back into like freelancing or moonlighting, at least, and then starting up a small little faith tech software company, so that I can build software that glorifies him while also learning technologies that will benefit me if I get like a freelance gig or anything like that. And then get more proficient in the technology stack at my job. So that's something that I've always done, is try to place myself in positions or desire to be in a position where I'm learning something that my current role can benefit off of. Because I know myself way too well, and I know the Lord knows me too well. If I invest in something that is away from what I'm currently doing, I'll put more time into that and then start to flake in the blessing that he has bestowed onto me, which is primary, which is the one that's benefiting my family. So like right now, like I have to continue learning .NET, C# because that's something that's being used within the tech stack when I'm doing like backend stuff and connecting the front end. But no, you're good, bro. It's been a really good conversation, and just to hear your story, and it's fueling something inside of me, and I wanted to cry when a little bit teared up inside when you talked about how they still wanted to hire you. We have very similar stories, and last year I got laid off, and a lot of our viewers and guests and those that don't know can go back to that episode about having faith in an uncertain market. um, I'll link that in the show notes and the video description. But during that time, I talked about how I was laid off from my previous role as a UI UX developer. Before that, I got laid off from a WordPress software company, as a video creator. And when I got laid off, I got severance. It was about to window, so I ended up driving for FedEx, which I shouldn't have because I'm a disabled vet. But it was the thing that I'm good at. I love driving, and I love talking to people and interacting with people, and getting to know the lay of the land. So that actually opened up opportunities, but it also allowed me to experience God in a different way that I've never experienced him before. When I needed strength to pick up like packages that were slightly over 100 pounds, I asked for strength, and God provided that Samsung like strength, and I was able to carry these packages without any back pain, without any foot pain down a hill. And I experienced God in such a way that was remarkable. It was miraculous. And then I couldn't keep that to myself. I told my family, but then I was in pain because I obviously, God allows those thorns in our flesh to remain, right, so that we can stay humble and seek Him. But fast forward, I was actually in the process of getting interviewed. I got 2 offers eventually. Only worked at FedEx for about 2 weeks and a half, and I got 2 offers, one for a B2B agency and the other one for working for a DoD company, locally here in Nebraska, but like an hour away. And that was more like contract to hire, but I needed benefits because my daughter was going to be born. So I needed something to fall onto, and that PTO. If I would have taken DoD and I would not work, then I would not get paid. But I ended up taking the job where I was at, and that was a learning experience. I did some really awesome stuff there, but then eventually I started feeling burnt out. The Lord saw what was transpiring. I got laid off, and then my wife was very supportive this time. And I told her I'm going to focus on reaching out to my network. And I reached out to my network. I talked to a good friend of mine's, Taylor, who is a recruiter. He's now at gun.io. And he says, bro, I will help you as much as I can. But the market's looking really, really tough. Like 6 months out. And God turned those 6 months into 6 weeks. I was constantly just devoted into Bible study with the guys from my previous job, because we had a Bible study group. We were still doing that. I started doing stuff for Code Fellowship, for the podcast, for the community. I started trying to build out things, but to make it shorter, and I take up most of the time here, I saw God's hand because I was devoting myself to him. And that's why I really like Romans 12:1, where Paul says, give your body as a living sacrifice so that you may know what's acceptable and holy in front of God. And then you also may know be discerning and know his will. Then he says, do not be transformed by do not be do not be transformed by the renewing. Yeah, do not conform to this world, right? But be transformed by the renewing of your mind. So that I love that 12:1-2 has been something that has stuck to me since the past year, because it truly is, when we work at our current jobs, when we serve other saints, when we serve those that are in need of Christ, that is our worship to God, because we are trying to expand the kingdom and bring life to people. And it's just really awesome to see the fruits of our labor through the gift that God gives us, and that we can enjoy it at the same time. But
yeah, for sure.
I know you don't want to go over. We're at the end of the podcast. I would love to have you probably in another episode. Maybe this might have to be a part 2, because it's just really inspiring and encouraging to hear your story. And you and I are very similar. We like to talk a lot. We have wives that are like, they're very nonchalant about things, right? They don't sugarcoat it. And we have kids, right? And family is important to us, especially as Hispanics. But your testimony really encourages me to continue being more dedicated to my family, because they're the only people that will be left if my career doesn't exist. There's God and my family, nothing else. Everything else withers away like the grass of the fields, right, under the sun.
That was something I came across a while back. I remember being like, well, when you're on your deathbed, like, what do you want surrounding you? A bunch of trophies and like accomplishments, or do you want people, like, and people that you've had a life with that love you? And I'd rather it be that,
Yeah.
So plus I 100% feel like we're here to interact with other people. Like, that's our main priority, and that's what Jesus did when he came. He always made time, no matter what he was doing. He made time for people. Like, and I think that's an incredible example of what we need to be doing in our lives. So
correct. Yeah, and I was thinking about the motto that I have for the podcast, where purpose meets function, and it came to realization to me that okay, well, what does this truly mean? And at the end of the day, our biggest purpose is to spread the gospel, right? To make disciples of all nations, and all people. And then what's the function in the model? Well, the function is it's being executed, right? It's executing that purpose that God has given us. And this podcast is an embodiment of that purpose, so that you guys who are developers, who love Christ, who are working day in day out for secular jobs, but also for God at the same time, can be seen and can come to light. Because there's a lot of people that are Christians in the tech space, but they feel like they don't have a voice, or they feel like if they speak up, they may lose what they have. But that is something that Jesus teaches us, right? He teaches the principle. Even Paul reiterates about that multiple times, where we live for Christ. We're not justified by our works. We are justified by faith in Jesus Christ. And if it means to lose it all for Christ, then we're in a much better place. Because like you said, you're doing these things in your life, or you've done these things in your life, knowing that God is going to walk with you. So Yeah, thank you for that. Thank you for that teaching today through your testimony. We'll get to the breadcrumb section so we can close out. I know that you filled out like the questionnaire at the beginning and kind of got a premise of what the breadcrumb is. You can share like a book, a movie, whatever it is that you feel could edify somebody within their career and their faith life. It could be words of wisdom, etc., or even like a gadget, or this bottle of water. It's been refreshing for me. Go get it, right? And then so it's up to you. Like, what would you like to share in this segment?
Yeah, that's pretty broad. So I would say, at least for like if you're just now learning how to code, I think I mentioned there's a
Mark
like a
Myers.
couple of books.
Yeah.
Yeah, Mark Myers, A Smarter Way to Learn HTML and CSS, A Smarter Way to Learn JavaScript. I think I have them back here actually. I'm not gonna get them, but because I had to find them.
They're somewhere back there, guys.
I'm pretty sure they're on that bookshelf. But anyway, both of those are really good. They come like they're like 1 or 2 page chapters that break it down, and then they also he has like 20, not problems, like 20 things for you to solve. I guess problems for you to solve in each chapter. So like you get like 1,800 things to solve, and that just that strengthens your skills. So that really helped me a lot. And then yeah, I mean, this is gonna seem really this is like the Sunday school answer, right? But like make time daily to be in the Bible.
Amen.
Like every day. I know there's like a podcast out of California called Through the Word that I listen to. And they go through the Word every day. They go through one chapter, and like right now I'm in Deuteronomy. I'm almost done, but like I started like last July. I've gone through the Bible 2 or 3 times, like full, but now I'm going with it. I'm going through it with Through the Word, and so they break down each chapter, and like it's a bunch of pastors that have gotten together to do it, and it's really good. But just make time to like to dig into the Bible every day. I think a lot of people have this Christian switch that they turn on Sundays, and throughout the week they don't live it. I met many students who, when I was teaching, that were like, "I'm a Christian," and I was like, "So what you said over there, like what I heard you saying outside of my office, did not sound very Christian. Like, are you sure?" And like, they would say things that they probably didn't need to say, and I'd call them out on it. I was like, "Look, if you like, don't tell me you're a Christian and then not act like it. Don't do that. Like, just But so same thing. Like, don't just live it and act and be a Christian one day of the week, because that's not how it works. You're either transformed or you're not. So
Amen.
If you are, you need to be that way every day, which means you need to be praying every day. You need to be in the Bible every day. Like, find time. If you can find time to watch TV or to get on YouTube or to
TikTok,
watch this podcast, yeah, you can find time to read the Word.
Amen.
So anyway.
Yeah, that's a really good exhortation. And for those that don't know what exhortation is, it just means that it's a very strict encouragement. But yeah, we gotta go, guys. Thank you so much for listening to this podcast episode. I don't have a breadcrumb. I think I did, but I don't have one now. So
I talked a lot.
I'll leave it. He ate all the breadcrumbs. he out ate the breadcrumbs in this episode. Yeah. Thank you so much for joining me, guys. And with Jonathan, I hope that you feel encouraged and blessed by this episode. This has been another episode of Code Fellowship, where purpose meets function. Feel free to check us out on Discord if you're a Christian developer looking for a safe place and a community where you want to be in fellowship with other brothers and sisters. Link will be in the show notes and video description, as well as follow us on social media and subscribe to the YouTube channel. I'll see you guys in the next one. Take care and God bless.